Hey, it's Rick here. How you doing today? It's 30 April. It's warm afternoon here in Rock Island, Illinois, even though it's not very sunny. What I'll talk a little today is from a musician standpoint, why we see a lot of aging rock and roll singers that probably should stop. Okay, now there's a reason. Why is that? Wonder why? Because there's a lot of other types of singers that can last longer into older age. Well, you got to look in terms of type of music and lifestyle. Now, I'm a musician myself, primarily a piano player, keyboards, piano, played bass, some guitar. I've done musicianship from started playing piano when I was 6 years old. And I appreciate all types of music. Well, most types of music. I understand talent in all types of music, classical to jazz, from big band through Motown, through classic rock, all that stuff, country even. Rock and roll in general is different because it tends to be a youthful thing. When we think of rock and roll, a lot of us from the past, I'm an 80s guy. Okay, usually young girls at a rock concert. It started with Elvis, right? All young girls pining. I mean, they did that stuff a little bit with Frank Sinatra and stuff back when they had the big bands, but nothing like rock and roll. Rock and roll has got a very young image. All that sex, drugs, and rock and roll stuff. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. You don't have to live like that because some don't. But there is a lot of indulgence in rock and roll genre in general. There always has been, especially in the 60s and the 70s. And so, look, people age. When you age, okay, there's a couple factors. Okay, so let's start with music in general. Your body ages. Your voice is a muscle. It ages. In general, people can play music. You'll see a lot of musicians that can play music. They'll do that into older age, and they can usually play very well. I mean, you do lose a little bit of ability, as you get older. Your cognitive, abilities. I had a stroke a little over a year ago, and I've recovered very fine, as you can see. But when I'm playing, I can tell the difference. A little bit of memory, just a little bit of timing, subtly. Things are a little harder since that. But generally speaking, you can play, great pianists play all the way into the 80s, 90s, Rubinstein, all the great players of the past. But when it comes to singing, it's different. That's a physical part of your body. That if you don't take care of your voice, and unfortunately, a lot of rock and roll singers, a lot of them had good voices naturally. Some were not the best. Rock and roll has not been traditionally the best as far as artistic voices. It's not like crooners or jazz singers, or certainly opera singers or anything like that. Rock and roll is a peasant type thing. See a lot of people up there that sometimes don't have the best of voices, but you can make them sound good in the studio. There are some with very good voices in all genres. I mean, Ronnie James Dio as a hard heavy metal had an excellent voice through most of his life. Okay, you got Rob Halford and Bruce Dickinson. These guys had very good, natural, powerful voices. And I'm not sure how much training they took, if they did, but they had some very good voices. Steve Perry had a very strong voice. Dennis DeYoung from Styx. Don Dawkins had a strong voice. He was young. Richard Marx, who's not really hard rock or anything, but he's definitely in the rock and roll genre, still can sing. There are singers that still can do it, but a lot of times it depends on how you sing. A lot of rock and roll singers don't sing properly. That's a fact. It's a very image-based type music and the long hair in the 80s and all that stuff. But a lot of times some of these great people that had some great singing voices never nurtured them over the years. Like maybe a trained jazz singer would, or a crooner, Michael Bublé, those type of people. They can sing. And Richard Marx, I saw him a year and a half ago, and he still can sing very well. Dennis DeYoung in the 70s can still sing. A lot of these, but if you don't sing properly, and many rock and roll singers didn't when they were younger, and especially the high-end rock and roll with a lot of screeching, you're done. You don't take, coupled with the fact that a lot of these people partied hard, didn't take care of their bodies. You start getting in your 50s and beyond, and you're trying to do, sing Lick It Up from Kiss. I mean, here's another one. People realize that Paul Stanley actually had a very good natural voice. It's difficult to sing those high-end songs, and he actually bettered himself at one point, the end of the 90s until the 2000s, and did the Phantom of the Opera in Toronto. He was the Phantom for 18 months. You can't do that unless you have something going down that's good, and his voice was at its best. But he never kept it up. Now, when you go hear Kiss, it's horrible. I mean that's why guys like John Bon Jovi never really sang properly. It's horrendous when you hear him live now. David Lee Roth, Vince Vince Neil. I mean, it's horrible. You could, and these people are charging $200-300 a ticket. You could get some drunk at a karaoke bar sound just as good. They're horrible. They never nurtured their voices, unfortunately. The type of music it's not easy as it is to do a lot of high end screeching. It just isn't, even when you're young on a tour. Now you throw in all this age and all these guys, Vince Neil. I'm sorry, but sometimes it looks like the guy's been on a 5-day binge of drinking. I mean, it's so he doesn't not taking care of himself. Your voice, you don't take care of your body. Your voice is part of that. Okay, vocal cords are part of that. You're not going to be up there and be able to do all that screeching stuff like you did when you were young. It's just not going to happen. It's not against them. It's just a reality of what happens when you get older and you're trying to have this image. And sometimes it's quite embarrassing. I mean, I recently heard Bon Jovi live, and it's like, oh my God, it's time. And some people pay upwards of $500 to sit in the front to see that. They still can play the music. I remember seeing David Lee Roth a couple years ago. I believe he retired, I think, and he'd come out and he was chewing gum. He cut his nose. He had this thing that was live outside, and they were doing Panama. They could still play it, but the vocals, God. And this is true of a lot of the old rockers. It's just the style of music. Rock and roll is filled with a lot of energy. There's a lot of indulgence, lifestyles of indulgence. And when you get older, time catches up to you. If you're a classical piano player or a jazz piano player, something like that, or a jazz band, or something that's, I don't want to say, when I say classier, I don't mean better. It depends on your opinion, because I like all of just different styles of music, as I stated. But if you're playing something tastefully, live, it doesn't really sound that much different. Like I saw Yanni, whether you like him or not, he's a piano player, creates music. When you hear that stuff live, it doesn't sound any different. It actually sounds sometimes better. Rock and roll has a lot of studio influences, a lot of overdubbing, a lot of echoes and voices and delays. A lot of times, like Def Leppard, I love Def Leppard, one of my favorite bands, but they have never sounded very good live. I have never heard them. That wonderful guitar sound from Hysteria, which Richard Marx actually copied. He loved that guitar sound. You don't get that live. They can't do that live. And Elliot's voice seems to be drowned out live. It's just, they would never, not because they're not good musicians, but there's so much studio work that goes into that sound that live, it just doesn't sound the same. And that's what rock and roll is like as it is. So that's just my take on some of why the old rockers don't sound well anymore. Doesn't mean they didn't have talent back in their day. But again, hard partying, a lot of music is very loud and screechy, not taking care of your voice, never really singing properly. Having a good natural voice, like Don Dokken, he can't sing anymore. You hear him, all that wonderful, songs that he did over there, Dream Warriors. There's no way he can do that anymore. And again, you don't take care of your voice. You don't sing, breathe properly. You start to age, all that partying and drinking. This is what you see when you see some of these old rockers, and it's like, guys, don't embarrass yourself, please. Stop. Don't your legacy be tarnished by a number of years of really making a fool of yourself. I don't want to see that from some of these great legends of the genre. It's Rick here. Feel free with comments, about music or anything like that. And have a great day. God bless.